You know what? Since we're talking about French tanks, we might as well talk about another tank that a lot of people have been talking about that is generally considered not a good tank. And I will say this, it's not a good tank. Though it's not as bad as the Schneider. And that is the Saint-Chamond. Are you familiar with this type?
I am. I believe this one is, I often refer to it as the French boat.
It was apparently originally designed as a poor copy of the Schneider. But being a poor copy of the Schneider, it actually performed better.
Yeah, this is exactly the one I was remembering.
But it's okay. So yeah, as you can see here, what they've got is the massive French 75 field gun. Well, not a massive, but it's a really good gun. The French 75 field gun was often considered one of the best field guns of the entire war because it was fast, accurate. The recoil was minimal on it. It was exact. It was a revolutionary piece of equipment. But what they have done here, as a necessity, is they actually took the wheels off of the carriage and they mounted the entire carriage of the gun into the tank. You can actually see the tail of the carriage in some of these pictures as well.
Yeah, I'm looking at the, I believe it's the third picture you've got there, and I can still see the artillery pinion.
Yeah. So I believe that they did that to as a necessity, as it was somehow necessary for you to be able to traverse the gun from side to side. So that's what they did there. Unfortunately, doing it this way made the tank a lot longer than it should be, which led to, well, you'll see. But as you can tell, at least in this design, it's much more roomy than in the other one. But the big problem with the Saint-Chamond can be summed up in a few pictures. I happen to have 5 pictures that show the exact same problem. See what I mean?
Yep. Just gets hung up on everything.
Yeah,
Or it would bury its gun.
that too. This tank did not like uneven terrain at all. This was such a problem that apparently French tank crews didn't want to even train on this thing, and that led to issues there. So that should give you a hint of how much of an issue this was. That said, once you actually get onto comparatively more open terrain, like towards the very end of the war, once the occasional breakthrough does actually happen, and these tanks are able to find themselves on open ground rather than the actual combat conditions they were actually designed to fight in, they performed better, at least, because, say what you will, this tank was actually fast. It actually had a top speed of 8 miles an hour. It was one of the fastest tanks the French had, believe it or not.
The thing is that bothers me about this tank the most is the French were just so close on stumbling onto an idea that would have been just beyond revolutionary. If they had just gone one step further, they would have had the self-propelled gun
Yep.
to follow the infantry. They were just so close, and then they just fell over themselves at the end.
Yeah. They actually... That's kind of how this thing was used when it was used successfully, ultimately, because, well, a
Yeah.
75 does do pretty interesting things to enemy fortifications when it gets a good shot on them.
Yeah,
So,
the French 75 was amazing. Oddly enough, so was the French 37, especially for cracking pillboxes.
yep. It might not have been good against tanks, as was found out later on during World War II, but here it's not quite that big of an issue.
Well, back then it was, Top Gun for its period, but time you hit the Second World War, it's everything but from the First World War is pretty much obsolete. With the exception of, like, your Enfields and your Mausers.
Well, I know some of the, if we're talking artillery, I know some heavier guns were from World War One. Some of the heavier artillery pieces, like, if I remember correctly, one of the United States heavier guns from World War Two was a model of 1918 155. That was pretty good.
Oh, more than likely.
Yeah. Old man Nixon says they did Renault. Yeah, the Renault FT will be getting to that. Don't worry.
Uh,
So yeah, the Saint-Chamond and the Schneider are two of the worst tanks, although the Saint-Chamond is not as bad as the Schneider, but then again, is there anything that's as bad as the Schneider?
no, there is not.